Like, honestly, I'm having a proper full-on gay crisis.
If you know anything about me, you know that I absolutely love the Heartstopper graphic novels written by Alice Oseman. I fell in love with them last year, and for a good period of time, could not shut up about them. So when I found out they were being adapted into a Netflix series, I was more than excited, and I had good reason to be, because when Heartstopper finally dropped on Netflix a couple weeks ago, I sat down and binged it in one day, and oh my goodness, I have things to say. Now, the last time I had things to say about a show, it resulted in a video that was way too long that made me way too angry far too many times, but I am pleased to announce that I did not have the same experience with Heartstopper. Heartstopper made me stupidly happy, which I guess is the first thing I have to say about it. Heartstopper is an absolute gem. Look, I didn't go into this show knowing that I was gonna love it. Even though it was adapted from a property I love, you never know with adaptations how good they'll end up being. But even if I knew absolutely nothing about Heartstopper beforehand, I still wouldn't have gotten my hopes up with the show. Whenever I start a movie or TV show, I always want to go into it objectively, with an open mind, with no previous biases, ready to praise the parts I find praiseworthy and criticize the parts that I think need it. And then I watched Heartstopper. In fact, I was very early on in the show when I realized that philosophy would have to go out the window with this. I'll show you what did it for me. I kid you not, I was 2 minutes into the very first episode, and we got served this moment. There. It was that shot with the hazy sunlight and the little smile and the leaves fluttering across the screen when I realized that there was no way I could review this show objectively. It is just not possible. So I guess that's the second thing I have to say about Heartstopper. This video is going to be heavily biased. It's going to be largely positive, it's going to be very gushy, and probably more than a little bit messy. This video is an elaborate Heartstopper appreciation post, and if you're not cool with that, then click off. I don't want you here anyway. I realize I haven't really explained what Heartstopper is about, so let's do that. Heartstopper follows Charlie Spring, a British high schooler in year 10 who attends an all-boys school named Truham. In form, Charlie is assigned to sit next to Nick Nelson, a popular rugby player in year 11, and the more time the two spend together, the more each starts to be drawn to the other. They fall in love, you get it. Now that you have a little understanding of what this show is about, let me get to the next thing I have to say about it. Heartstopper ruined my life. I'm not kidding, it really did. The thing about me is that every once in a while, I will consume a piece of media that hits me differently, and when that happens, it gets intense. Heartstopper is the most recent story to do that, and when I say it ruined my life, I mean it. It has completely taken over my being. I keep thinking about it, I keep listening to the music, I reread the comics, I've seen so many cast interviews and behind-the-scenes videos. My entire TikTok For You page is just Heartstopper content. Heartstopper is literally my entire life now. And just when I thought my obsession was starting to die down, Pride Month started, and all things Heartstopper came back at me in full force. It's the second Alice Oseman thing to do this for me, the other being Radio Silence. Side note, read Radio Silence. I think if we ever get an adaptation for that book, I wouldn't survive it. Like, I would genuinely fear for my life. So what is it about Heartstopper that made this happen? Why did it take over my life to the extent that it did? Well, there's a lot to love about Heartstopper. Obviously, the healthy queer representation is its main drawing factor, but there's more to this show that makes it as awesome as it is. For one thing, I think this show depicts the high school experience with a lot of realism, at least more than we see from other shows made for teenagers. I don't know about you, but I never had the high school experience that's so often sold to us by American media. Popular kids didn't really exist, and neither did losers. Some people were rather well known throughout the school, sure, but never to the point where we worshipped the ground they walked on. Everyone in the same grade sort of knew each other as a result of spending 4 years having classes together. It was also common to know people in the grades above and below you as a result of shared extracurriculars. Yes, there were some specific social groups made from extracurriculars. For example, at my high school, the student council kids hung out together a lot, and these were kids from all 4 grades, mind you. I personally hung out with a lot of people who ran the library. Again, people from all 4 grades. And even though there were some tighter social groups like that, there were never cliques. Kids in the student council still hung out with kids in the library council. Star athletes were also in STEM clubs. Art kids would still talk to the tech kids. Everyone sort of just meshed. It's called being a realistic, well-rounded student. There wasn't really a social hierarchy. Yeah, there were some kids who sucked and wanted to hurt other people, but that was more of an individual problem rather than a culture. The truth is, and I think most people who have been in high school in the last 10 years or so can agree, that the version of high school pushed to us in American media is just not true. It's likely a narrow depiction of what high school was like around 30 to 40 years ago. After all, it seems that this version of high school originated in American media in the 80s and just stuck around for decades after it stopped being true, for no reason other than writers didn't know how to write high school students now. Heartstopper offers a different look at high school, one that's a lot closer to the truth of it now. There aren't really cliques in the school. People just join whatever extracurriculars they want. Students know people both older and younger than them. Students don't have a million friends. They have tight-knit groups that they're ride or die for. They're still bullies, but that's unfortunately going to be the case anywhere, anytime. Heartstopper understands what high school life looks like now, and that's such an important thing to get right, seeing as its target audience are people who are high school aged. Heartstopper's depiction of high school is much closer to what high school is actually like, at least in my experience. And that's an example of one of Heartstopper's biggest strengths, its relatability. You can feel it in every aspect of the show. Heartstopper understands how to write teenagers now. As a Gen Z, I can say that we are very weird. Our humor is weird, the stuff we're into is weird, and it's incredibly easy to not understand how we work. So the fact that Heartstopper not only understands our stupid sense of humor, but successfully emulates it is incredible. The second I saw Charlie's phone screensaver, I knew this thing would be great. He has a gay panic screensaver, that's so funny. I also love the text messages between Charlie and Nick. Nothing is as distracting to me when I'm watching a show or a movie and the characters' text messages are like blank, other than the message that's important to the scene, or if the messages are weirdly forced. The messages between Charlie and Nick seem very real. Like, they text the exact way I text with my friends, with way too much enthusiasm and way too many exclamation marks. It's cute and corny and perfect. I love it so much. One of my favorite little moments of the show comes in episode 6, when Tara and Darcy get locked in a music room. As they're kissing, Charlie, Nick, Tao, and Elle come looking for them, and Darcy yells out homophobia since the four of them interrupted them kissing.
Tara? Homophobia! Women here, we got locked in!
It's funny and it's real. Jokingly blaming any minor inconvenience on things like that is just funny. Heartstopper understands its audience so well, and it continuously proves that by taking things right from the audience's brains and portraying it on screen. I also love the visual quirks this show employs. As I mentioned, Heartstopper is adapted from a series of webtoons that were then later published into graphic novels. Alice Oseman's art style is so unique to this story. As soon as you see it, you know it's Heartstopper, and the show made the fantastic decision of translating it to the screen. The show incorporates little animations of flowers and hearts and leaves as a way to visually convey the emotions of characters. It adds so much life and whimsy into the show and further encapsulates all the feelings being portrayed. It's so damn cute, I genuinely can't handle it. Which leads me to my last point here. Heartstopper is so cute. Like, dangerously cute. It's so cute it physically hurts, and I'm not exaggerating here, I'm completely serious. When I was watching Heartstopper, I had the biggest, stupidest smile on my face the entire time. And it's not like I wanted to be smiling. It happens unconsciously. I sit down to watch this thing, and within a few seconds, I'm just smiling like an idiot, and I kept smiling until my face was aching. At that point, I would make the conscious effort to stop smiling to save my face muscles, but without fail, I would just end up smiling again a minute later. That's how cute Heartstopper is. It has this special ability to make you feel like the events of the show are happening to you. Watching Heartstopper feels like you have a new best friend, and you have a new crush, and that you're falling in love. The love and joy depicted in the show is so easily contagious. It fills your heart so much, you don't even know what to do. It's awful and it hurts, but it's so good. Heartstopper is a feel-good show that can lift anyone's spirits. Okay, let's talk more in depth about Heartstopper's characters, because they really do make this show as fun as it is. Charlie Spring is our main character. He's sweet and easily likable, but also sort of shy, quiet, and reserved, largely as a result of some pretty brutal bullying he experienced last year after word made it around the school that he was gay. Because though he's openly gay now, it wasn't necessarily his choice for the entire school to know, and for good reason, seeing as people jumped at the chance to make his life hell. During the worst of it, he took refuge in the art teacher, Mr. Ajayi's classroom, and still confides in him now. When we meet Charlie, he is secretly involved with another student named Ben Hope, who is a dick. The two of them will often meet privately to make out, always on Ben's schedule, but outside of these sessions, Ben either ignores Charlie or is flat out mean to him whenever they do interact, and even goes out on dates with girls. It's obvious that Ben is still figuring out his sexuality and isn't ready to come out yet, but that's no excuse to treat another person like trash. Ben basically uses Charlie for his own benefit, but never once takes Charlie's feelings into account. Charlie thinks that he could finally have a real boyfriend with Ben, but after seeing him be way too friendly with girls, realizes Ben doesn't actually care about him. This is particularly painful to him since Charlie feels that he's not worth other people's time. Having Ben spend time with him meant a lot to him, and realizing that he didn't actually care was devastating. Ben himself is just awful. He's mean, he's manipulative, his internal homophobia is super strong, and oh yeah, he essays Charlie. So yeah, not a good dude. And a lot of the boys at school are similar to him, because unfortunately, high school boys are awful. They think they're hot shit, they think being edgy is cool, and feel like frat boys, they just give off negative energy. Now, of course, not all high school boys are like this. I personally have had some great guy friends in high school, but I would be lying if I didn't say that a lot of high school boys just aren't fun to be around. Factor in that Nick and Charlie seem to live in a relatively small, sheltered area, and yeah, it's not inconceivable that high school boys would make a gay kid's life hell. The bullying that Charlie faced in the year before the show starts was relentless and brought his mental health and self-esteem to an all-time low. The pain he felt affected every aspect of his life and further spurred on his belief that he was worthless. The thing about Charlie is that he's a very bright kid with a lot to offer. He gets good grades, he's a talented drummer, and he's a skilled runner. He has so much to be proud about and love about himself, but Charlie can't see that. Charlie is under the impression that simply his existence is annoying to people. He's always felt like a burden on others and has never felt like he was actually wanted or appreciated by anyone who's not his super close friends. So his friendship with Nick is so special to him because for one of the first times in his life, and definitely the first time since coming out, someone new actually seems to enjoy spending time with him. That may be part of why Charlie falls for him so quickly and so hard. He's excited at the prospect of someone liking him. Throughout the show, different aspects of Nick's life start to fall apart. After Harry, who's like the main bully, makes a particularly messed up comment about Charlie, Nick gets into a fight and cuts off all his rugby friends. Upon learning this, Charlie is horrified since he thinks it was his fault this happened to Nick. So Charlie decides he needs to stop seeing Nick, because in his head, he's once again being a burden on another person. He thinks he's ruining Nick's life. And it's difficult to watch. The bullying he faced affected him so deeply that it caused severe harm to both his physical and mental health that he's still struggling with currently, and continues to struggle with in the future installments of the graphic novels. I'm interested to see these storylines explored further in the coming seasons, because they're really important and very real, which Heartstopper seems to specialize in. The last thing I want to touch on with Charlie is his relationship with his older sister, Tori. If you don't know, Tori is another character in the Osemanverse, which is the shared universe in which all Alice Oseman's stories take place. Tori Spring is actually the main character of Solitaire, Oseman's debut novel, but in Heartstopper she's more of a supporting character, and I love her. She is just so great. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, but the moments she is on screen are always delightful. She just stands in the background of scenes sipping on a drink and both encourages and teases Charlie about his obvious feelings for Nick. She's so cool.
Okay, see you Monday.
I don't think he's straight.
But while Tori is a fun, lighthearted presence to have, she's also a fantastic sister when it really comes down to it. Near the end of the season, when Charlie is at his lowest, Tori doesn't hesitate to be there for him. She very clearly cares about him so much, and it likely scares her to see him like this, especially since she knows exactly what went down in the previous year. Their final scene together is one that genuinely breaks my heart.
Maybe I do just ruin people's lives. It'd be better if I didn't exist.
You're not ruining my life.
Thanks.
Charlie and Tori's relationship is an important one, and I'm really glad it got the time it needed. There's a couple other miscellaneous things I love about Charlie, like he's always worrying over how his hair looks when he goes to see Nick, or how quickly he falls in love with Nick's dog Nellie. He's a wonderful character with a lot of darkness in him that he's still trying to work through, and he absolutely deserves the world. Okay, let's talk about the Golden Retriever now. I have to warn you right now that this section of the video will be a lot. I'm gonna gush about this boy for several minutes with abandon because Nick Nelson is one of my favorite characters. Not just one of my favorite characters in Heartstopper, one of my favorite characters ever. Allow me to explain. Nick Nelson is the star rugby player on Truham's rugby team. He has a lot of friends and is fairly well liked by people. In so much of young adult media, this sort of jock character archetype is kind of a dick. They're super popular, they think they're hot shit, they wouldn't be caught dead hanging out with the nerds or students of a lower social status than them. Every guy wants to be him and every girl wants to be with him. If the jock is the main character, it's only after they start spending time with nerds or losers that their ego deflates. They become more grounded and start to grow as a person, and they fall for the nerdy girl. It's a tale as old as time. It's been done over and over again in American media especially, so much so that it's an expected part of stories like this. The jock is never likable, at least not until they meet the nerdy girl, and it's the nerdy girl that brings out his true self. At first glance, it may seem that Nick would fall into this character archetype and arc. He's the jock, that's what he's best known for, and anyone who's consumed any young adult media in the last, 30 years would probably think they knew exactly where this story was going and how Nick would develop. And they would be completely wrong. Nick is definitely a jock, but that's where the similarities between him and the other jock characters end. Nick is good at rugby, yes, but he's not egotistical, he's not super cool, he's not the end-all be-all of the school and never thinks he is. Nick isn't necessarily popular, he's just another student, and rugby is just another extracurricular. In fact, the graphic novels make it clear that Charlie is actually considered more popular than Nick. After sixth formers stopped people from bullying him, Charlie was able to get his life back together and was pretty well liked by the people in his year. And aside from that, even if people don't know Charlie, they know of Charlie. Being the only out gay kid in school will make people know your name. While Charlie doesn't have the same amount of presence in the show, he's not like the uncool nerd to Nick's god status jock. Nick is not a god. He's a down-to-earth kid who happens to be good at throwing a ball. Nick's personality is also completely different from the jock archetype we know so well. While jocks in media tend to be unlikable, Nick is one of the most likable characters in the show. He's kind and sweet. He always has the time in a day to say hi to Charlie when they pass each other in the halls. He's thoughtful, he's a great friend, and he genuinely cares for others. He's incredibly supportive, he doesn't care about social hierarchies, and he's just a comforting presence to have. Like I said, he's a golden retriever in human form. It's impossible to hate him. Nick is not at all like the jock character we've grown so accustomed to. He's a wonderful person right from the start, and that subversion alone is one of the reasons I love him so much. His arc isn't about learning how to do the bare minimum and be more grounded. His arc is about figuring out who he is outside of other people's expectations. In fact, a lot of Nick's character is based around appearances and expectations. Nick's status as the school's star rugby player comes with a certain set of expectations that are put onto him by other people, both in-world and outside of it. We as an audience assume Nick would be an asshole just from genre conventions and what we've been told about people like him from other media, but he turns out to be the exact opposite. In-world, people assume that Nick is the hyper-straight, macho, tough guy. Everyone who knows him or knows of him thinks this. Nothing different has ever crossed their minds. They sort of take it as a given just because he quote-unquote looks like a straight guy. Even Nick himself has considered himself to be straight for the majority of his life. He's always liked girls. It's after he meets Charlie and starts to feel things for him that he starts to seriously question what his sexuality even is. And this process of questioning and figuring out who he really is not made any easier by the people around him. It's the very expectation that Nick is the straightest guy on the planet, an expectation put on him by others, that causes a lot of issues for him, both in his relationship with Charlie and his internal journey of finding himself. I mean, people think he's still hung up on Tara since he had a crush on her years ago and kissed her once at a party. He agrees to go out with Imogen because she asked him in front of a bunch of his friends and everyone was expecting him to say yes. No one has any regard for the fact that Nick has barely talked to Tara since that party, or that he's never shown any sort of romantic interest towards Imogen. They just assume things about Nick. Teenagers are already self-conscious. They already want to do whatever it takes to fit in and be liked, even if it's not something they actually want to be doing. So to throw on top of that serious confusion of who you are as a person and the realization that you might be the exact opposite person everyone thinks you are, and it's a recipe for disaster. Thankfully, Nick is mature, and with some help from his mother, is able to get out of the situation with Imogen in an amicable way, but the pressure of expectations has already done its damage, especially since this identity he's been given has followed him for his entire life. It takes a lot to undo that in your own brain, and seeing Nick try to work through it is extremely relatable. Another fantastic thing about him is that Nick is bisexual. I feel like there's a real lack of bisexual representation in media. Much of the queer rep we get is gay, which is fantastic and needs to continue happening more. But the bisexual experience is not always the same as the gay experience, and I think Nick is a great embodiment of that. In episode 6, Nick and Charlie talk about their individual experiences with figuring out their sexuality.
How did you realise you were gay?
I guess I've always been sort of aware of it, even when I was really young. I didn't understand it at the time, but it's always been boys.
A lot of books and movies that feature this sort of conversation give a very similar answer to Charlie's, but I think Heartstopper is the first piece of media I've come across that gives us a character who doesn't have that answer. Like I mentioned before, Nick has spent his life until now being attracted to women. He's never thought about the possibility of being attracted to men as well until he was head-on confronted with it. At least he's never consciously thought about that possibility, because we see in the show that there were hints throughout Nick's past that he might have also been attracted to men. At the beginning of episode 6, Nick has a movie night with his mother, where they watch Pirates of the Caribbean. They watch this movie together countless times, and his mother jokes that it was because Nick had a crush on Keira Knightley. And this is the sequence we get next.
I mean, yes, they are, but... Don't stop.
yes, it was rewatching this movie that helped Nick realize what his sexuality might actually be. And this was super relatable for a lot of people, and also hilarious. It's pretty widely known that Pirates of the Caribbean has caused millions of bisexual awakenings, and I love that the meme of this movie was worked into the show. 'Cause, yeah, it's true. I mean, some people watch Pirates of the Caribbean over and over again throughout their youth because Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom are both hot. Other people watch Pirates of the Caribbean once when they were too young to really be attracted to anyone, then spent all of 4th grade having a crush on Orlando Bloom because their 4th grade teacher had a poster of him in the room, and then years later discovered pictures of Keira Knightley in a pirate gear on Pinterest and did a double take. To each their own. Other people watch Atonement and become infatuated with both Keira Knightley and James McAvoy. It's always Keira Knightley, isn't it? But yeah, this scene is not just a nod to a widely known joke in the bisexual community, but it's also an example of the process. The process of figuring things out for yourself, which often entails looking back on your previous actions and experiences and recontextualizing them given the new information you now have. AKA realizing what the action of rewatching Pirates of the Caribbean over and over again really meant to Nick, realizing the truth of it. It's things like this that are holy shit moments for him, and I think it's a pretty universal queer experience, specifically a bisexual experience in Nick's case. So no, it's not always been boys for him the same way it has been for Charlie. It's a lot different. Both experiences have their nuances and are tough to work through, but I love that we get to see this from Nick. I talked about Ben before, but I need to bring him up again, because Nick and Ben act as foils to each other, and it's part of what makes Nick's character arc as interesting as it is. Ben, as we've already established, is awful. He doesn't give a crap about Charlie, he essayed Charlie, he continuously torments Charlie throughout the season. When Nick and Charlie finally kiss in episode 3, Nick needs to take some time to learn who he really is, and during this time, he asks to keep their relationship a secret, to which Charlie agrees. Keeping the relationship a secret is exactly what Ben wanted as well, but unlike Ben, Nick doesn't drop Charlie in public. He doesn't avoid him, he doesn't act like he doesn't know him, he's not mean to him, ever. He still talks to him and hangs out with him the same way he did before they kissed, and that's the thing that makes Nick completely different from Ben. While they both ask for the same thing from Charlie, they approach it in different ways. Ben immediately makes Charlie feel like crap, while Nick still makes him feel appreciated. It just goes to show the kind of person Nick is and endears him to Charlie even more. Nick spends the rest of the show figuring out his sexuality while also trying to deal with his year 11 friends, a number of whom are just terrible. Nick expresses multiple times that he hates the way they act and wants to stop being friends with them. In the graphic novels, Nick drops his friends pretty quickly after realizing how awful they are, but in the show, it takes him a little bit longer to get there. In the graphic novels, Nick fully realizes how awful his friends are after taking Charlie to see a movie with them, where Harry calls Charlie a slur. This makes him snap, and after punching Harry and getting punched back, he fully gives up on his friends. In the show, there are a couple other instances before this where Nick expresses wanting to leave his friends, but he doesn't actually follow through with this until the night at the movies. I sort of understand this. Nick has never really liked Harry, but he's hung out with his other friends for years, and it might seem daunting to let all of them go all at once. Doing so would essentially leave him with no one, and once again, that's probably terrifying for a teenager. In episode 5, Nick comes to Charlie's birthday party and meets his friends, most of whom like Nick and are a lot more his speed. It takes some time for Tao to be won over, we'll talk about it more later. He also starts hanging out with Tara and Darcy, who also make him feel a lot more like himself. I think finding new people to hang out with, people who don't make him feel like crap and create a comfortable space for him, makes him strong enough to kick his own friends to the curb. He realizes that Charlie, Tao, Elle, Isaac, Tara, and Darcy are what real friends are. And if these people are an option, then why would he ever choose those stupid high school boys? Again, it's a super realistic depiction of problems and solutions teenagers have, and it's a powerful experience for Nick to go through. The final thing about Nick I want to talk about is sports day. Charlie has been avoiding Nick because he thinks that it's his fault Nick got into a fight with Harry. Even though Nick chose that, Charlie still blames himself. He thinks Nick would be better off if he and Charlie didn't date, and Nick spends the episode trying to find Charlie to convince him otherwise. It's only during the big rugby game at the end of the sports day that Nick spots Charlie in the crowd, and he drops everything to go to him. At first, I thought this was a little cheesy and a little cringy because a big declaration of love in a public setting has been so overdone at this point, but Heartstopper once again subverts this trope. Nick is literally playing a rugby game. He's about to kick the ball back into play or something. I don't know how rugby works. But he sees Charlie in the crowd and just stops everything. He straight up throws a rut into the entire game and just leaves with Charlie, which is not only such a power move, but also really sweet. Instead of having this big declaration of love in front of everyone, the two of them run off together and do it privately, which makes a lot more sense for the type of people they are. And the speech he gives Charlie is the stuff of legend.
I need you to know that my life is way better because I met you.
You don't have to say that.
I do, and I'll keep on saying it until you believe me. I mean, you are the kindest, most thoughtful and caring and amazing person in the whole world. And if you really want to break up, then I would respect your decision, but I want us to be together.
Nick.
You're my favourite person.
Nick.
I need you to believe me.
Nick. I believe you. I believe you.
And once again, I think this is such a fantastic representation of who Nick is. If, after hearing all this, Charlie still doesn't think the two of them dating is a good idea, then he'll respect that and leave him alone. But he just needs Charlie to know the positive effect he's had on Nick's life. He needs Charlie to know how happy he makes him. He needs Charlie to know that he's not a burden, not by a long shot. And it's beautiful. It makes me all gooey on the inside, and the two of them deserve happiness forever. Nick's coming out scene is also fantastic. Both Kit Connor and Olivia Colman deliver beautiful performances, and it's such a cathartic end to this part of Nick's arc. I love this boy so much. I'm gonna have to stop talking about him at some point, so let's end it here. Seriously, I could go on and on about my love for Nick Nelson, but I do have other things to say, so let's move on and talk about Tao. Tao Su is one of Charlie's best friends and has been for years. He's kind of a goofy kid, he loves his friends to death, and he's a very important presence in Charlie's life. Tao was always there for Charlie when no one else was, and as a result, the two of them share a strong bond in which each wants the best for the other, which is actually why Tao is very against the idea of Charlie having a relationship with Nick. At first, this is because everyone thinks Nick is straight, and Tao doesn't want Charlie to waste away pining after a straight guy. But even after it's discovered that Tao isn't straight, Tao still does not like Nick at all, because Nick is the exact kind of person that used to bully Charlie last year. A lot of turmoil Charlie went through was at the hands of hyper-straight rugby boys, and on the outside, Nick seems like that type of guy, as we already discussed. For Tao, Charlie's relationship with Nick could go one of two ways. Charlie could hurt himself by harboring unrequited feelings for a straight boy, or Charlie could be toyed with by Nick and once again be the victim of ruthless bullying after Nick inevitably gets tired of leading him on. In Tao's head, it's always going to end badly for Charlie, and Tao, being as protective of his friends as he is, doesn't want that to happen. As the season progresses and it seems like Nick might actually be genuine, Tao has to warm up to Nick, especially since it means so much to Charlie. This is particularly difficult for him because even though Nick seems like a nice guy to everyone else, Tao is hardwired to mistrust him from witnessing Charlie's previous experiences, and his own bullying at the hands of Harry and his lackeys. Tao does not like people easily. It's part of his protective nature. Anyone who isn't Charlie, Elle, and Isaac can potentially cause them pain. On top of that, Tao is fundamentally scared of change. He likes the status quo of their friend group, he's comfortable in that status quo, and changing their dynamic opens up the possibility that they might drift apart. When the show starts, the friend group has already changed. Elle, as a trans girl, no longer goes to Truham and instead goes to the girls' school called Higgs. Elle, who is a part of their everyday lives and a big part of the comfort Tao finds at school, is gone. They don't see each other as often as they used to, which is hard for both of them. Tao often texts Elle throughout the school day because he misses her, and this change of Elle going to a different school is ultimately a good one because Elle is finally able to be who she really is, and Tao has no problem with that. He just keeps buying her apple juice by accident and misses her, which is understandable. But when Tao has to face changes he doesn't see as good, namely Charlie starting to hang out with Nick, those changes start snowballing and he has a hard time coping with it. For those reasons, Tao is the last person in the friend group to fully like Nick without any reservations. And because of their strange dynamic, I really enjoyed the scenes Nick and Tao shared, namely the scene at the bowling alley in episode 5 and the scene at lunch in episode 8. The scene in episode 5 isn't anything huge. It's Tao trying to intimidate Nick and discourage him from messing around with Charlie when he doesn't mean anything deeper by it. It's a short scene, but it lets these two talk to each other with a more humorous atmosphere. Tao shoving fries into his mouth while looking Nick dead in the eye is funnier than has any business being. But the scene in episode 8 is the one that I really like. At this point, Tao has found out that Nick and Charlie are dating, and also found out that he was the last person to know. Charlie deliberately kept it from him, and Tao is deeply upset by that. For Nick, Charlie is avoiding him because Charlie thinks he's ruining Nick's life. Nick goes looking for Charlie outside since he thinks he might be having lunch with Tao, but he's not. He only finds Tao. Nick sits down with him and the two of them just genuinely talk to each other, which is something they haven't really done before. And I think it's fitting that the thing to bring them together for this heart-to-heart and the major subject of their heart-to-heart is Charlie. Charlie is one of the most important people in their lives at the moment. Each of them value their relationships with him greatly, and each of them want the best for him. And that means reconciling with each other.
I think Charlie might be nervous about telling you because he really cares about your opinion. Because he loves you a lot.
He probably wants to be something more than secret guy you kiss sometimes on the down low. And if you can't give him more than that, then, I mean, that's fine, but it's always going to make him feel a little bit crap about himself. You should talk to him.
It's a very simple scene, but one I really like, and one that's important to Tao as a person. Though part of him is upset at Charlie for hiding his relationship with Nick, an even larger part of him is kicking himself for the role he played in Harry's bullying. Speaking of Harry and bullying, Tao's character in the show is much more confrontational than he is in the graphic novels, and I think this is an addition that works well for him and his potential future arcs. Now, spoiler alert for Heartstopper Volume 3. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear it. During the conversation with Nick in episode 8, Tao says that had he known the truth about Nick and Charlie, maybe he would have just kept his head down and not engaged with Harry to make things easier on Charlie. Standing up to your bullies is sort of a double-edged sword. On one side, it's a display of strength and can show your bullies you're not one to be messed with. But on the other side, your bullies can realize that they can get a rise out of you, and bully you even harder to continue entertaining themselves. It's a difficult line to walk, and the way that Tao stands up to Harry is sort of inflammatory. The two of them going head-to-head is entertaining for the people around them, and if anything, it only makes Harry want to hurt Tao and Charlie more. The addition of Tao being a bit more hot-headed, loud, and quick to engage in bad situations could further inform information we learn about him in the later volumes of the story. In Volume 3, we learn that Tao may have been the reason Charlie got outed. Tao never meant to out him, but he and Aled, who is sort of replaced by Isaac in the show, were discussing it, and Tao was speaking a little bit too loud enough that people with bad intentions could have overheard him. And this is the reason Charlie holds off on telling Tao about him and Nick for as long as he does. He doesn't blame Tao, it was an accident after all, but part of him is afraid it might happen again, and he doesn't want to relive the bullying, nor does he ever want Nick to have to face that. When Charlie finally tells Tao about him and Nick, and why he hid it for so long, Tao is conflicted. Like in the show, he's upset that Charlie hid the relationship, but he's even more devastated that everything that happened to Charlie last year was indirectly his fault. Tao spent years loving and supporting Charlie. He was Charlie's only real friend during the bad years, since they weren't as close to Elle and Aled/Isaac yet. He saw Charlie's mental health decline in a terrifying way, and in his head, it was all his fault. In that same way, Tao's realization in the show that he might have unnecessarily made the bullying worse by engaging with Harry rather than ignoring him is sort of preamble for the guilt he feels later on in the story. Now, I do think Tao's motivations in the show could have been cleaned up a little bit. I totally understand and am on board with his love for his friends and his desire to protect Charlie in particular, but I could have used some extrapolation on his fear of change. Why exactly is he like that? What makes him so scared of change and ending up alone? I hope that's explored more in the next season because it could definitely be a compelling aspect of his character. Okay, let's move on. Elle Argent is another one of Charlie's closest friends. She's smart, she's kind, but she's also a little insecure at the moment. Elle went to school with Charlie, Tao, and Isaac for a while before coming out as trans and eventually moving to the girls' school. When the show starts, she's still trying to find her footing at her new school, which is a little bit difficult. Not only did she move in the middle of the year, but everyone already has their established friend groups at this point since they've all known each other for years. So it's a little awkward for her. She doesn't really have friends, a fact that, when noticed by her teachers, prompts them to encourage her to make friends with Tara and Darcy since they're like the school's bright spots. And that's one of Elle's biggest arcs this season, learning how to live her new life while not letting go of the positive aspects of the life she had before, namely her friends. Because she no longer goes to the same school as Charlie, Tao, and Isaac, she has to split her time between them and her new friends Tara and Darcy. While it could have been hard, things end up working out well for her. She's able to bridge the gap between the boys and the girls and create a bigger and even more positive environment for everyone involved. Seriously, this entire friend group is just queer, with the exception of Tao, but we'll talk about this big friend group in more detail later on. Elle's secondary arc this season is coming to terms with her burgeoning feelings for Tao. As the season progresses, Elle finds herself looking at Tao in a different, more romantic light. A combination of them now going to different schools and the changing dynamic of the friend group leads to them hanging out one-on-one a lot more often, and the newfound closeness they share is definitely fanning the flames of her crush. But Elle is put off by the idea of doing anything about it because she knows Tao very well. She understands Tao doesn't like change, and so much about their lives has already shifted in a relatively short period of time. In her head, letting Tao know how she feels would break that even further, especially if Tao didn't reciprocate her feelings, and she couldn't bear that. She would rather have Tao in her life as just a friend than lose him completely. Because as much as Tao doesn't like change, I think there's a part of Elle that's also scared of it, at least a little. She's already gone through a lot in the last little while, and right now she needs the people who she loves and who love her. The final episode of the season hints that Tao might be starting to like Elle as well, so I can't wait to see the relationship officially get started. Yay, Paris trip! As of now, I don't really have much else to say about Elle. She probably had one of the simpler arcs this season, and I would love to see more from her in the coming ones. Okay, let's talk about everyone's favorite lesbians. Tara and Darcy are Elle's and the whole group's newfound friends. They've been dating for a while in secret, but eventually let Elle know about their relationship. In fact, I think Elle is one of the first people they told about them being together, which was huge for not only them, but Elle too. It showed they liked her and trusted her enough to tell her, which is pretty powerful. Tara and Darcy are just awesome. Point blank period. They're so cool, they're better people than all of us, they deserve the world, and I wish they were my friends. Tara is the star student. She embodies Higgs' spirit, people like her very easily, and that's students and teachers. She has a really approachable energy to her and takes Elle in as soon as Elle shows any interest in becoming friends with them. Darcy is just as great. She's loud, she's funny, she's sarcastic, she has messy little shit energy, and I love her to death. Their relationship is healthy and wholesome, and so important to the show. Tara and Darcy's relationship sort of parallels that of Nick and Charlie. Darcy, like Charlie, has been out for a while now, while Tara, like Nick, isn't. Tara and Darcy keep their relationship on the down low for a while, but eventually Tara works up the courage to come out officially, and she does so by posting a photo of her and Darcy together on Instagram. She's met with a lot of love and support, but of course there are also people out there that bully her and make things not as picture perfect as she wished they were. This causes her to panic and second-guess her decision. Once again, Heartstopper very clearly understands the issues it's talking about. It's not like a queer person comes out once and then gets to live happily ever after. There are good points and there are bad points, and that will affect the person in question even after they've come out. This will likely carry on in the coming seasons of the show with Nick's coming out journey, seeing as there are people in his life he wants to tell and people he doesn't, situations that go well and situations that don't. It's incredibly important to talk about, and I'm just so happy Heartstopper's exploring it through beloved characters like Tara and Nick. At the end of the day, Tara and Darcy are just wonderful presences to have, and they definitely make this show even better. They didn't have the biggest roles in the early Heartstopper graphic novels, so I'm beyond glad their story was beefed up for the show. In fact, that brings me to my next point. Heartstopper is a great adaptation. Most of the story is lifted right out of the graphic novels, from dialogue to certain frames to the leaf and flower motifs associated with it. It's so fun to read these books and then watch the show, because it's like you're watching these pages come to life. I think part of what makes it such a successful adaptation is that Alice Oseman herself wrote the screenplays for the show. She understood how to best adapt her own work, and that included keeping the things that worked and changing the things that didn't. For example, the first season of Heartstopper is based off volumes 1 and 2 of the book series, in which the characters of Tao, Elle, Tara, and Darcy don't get that heavily featured. They're much more so supporting characters than they are part of the main cast. Really, the main cast of the first 2 volumes of Heartstopper were just Nick and Charlie, and that worked for the short graphic novels. It was a focused story about 2 boys falling for each other, but Oseman rightly realized that that would not be enough to support a whole season of television. A successful television series needs subplots to support the main plots, otherwise there's just not enough story to tell. So the characters of Tao, Elle, Tara, and Darcy and their individual character arcs were developed further so that they could round out the series and make it exciting and satisfying. It was a good change to make for the show, and I have similar feelings about the character of Imogen. Imogen is an addition that's completely new to the show, and I want to talk about her because I feel like she gets a lot of undeserved hate. She asks him out on a date in front of the rugby boys, and though Nick is starting to like Charlie, he panics and agrees since everyone expects him to. He immediately regrets it because he doesn't like Imogen like that and doesn't want to give her false hope, and also because he's trying to figure out his feelings towards Charlie and doesn't want to hurt him. And this whole thing sparks one of the best moments in television as a whole.
Oh, do you like this girl?
Well, her dog died.
Side note, Olivia Colman plays Nick's mom, and she's delightful as always. I had no idea she was in this show and was incredibly excited when I saw her. Just another reason you should go watch it, because Olivia Colman is amazing. Nick eventually does let Imogen know he's not into her like that, and he's currently struggling to figure out who he is, and Imogen, while a little sad, is totally on board with that. At that point, she does sort of disappear from the story, which isn't great. It's like my one complaint with the writing of this show. She disappears as soon as she doesn't serve a purpose anymore, which I think is kind of weak. Part of me understands because if she doesn't have a storyline, then she doesn't matter, but I would have liked to see some more story from her. I think it could have been interesting to see her life outside of Nick. Like, what's next for her? I think it could have been compelling to see her try to be a good ally with her sometimes flawed approach to the subject. Like, this scene is once again one of the best moments in television ever.
I'm not like homophobic. I'm an ally.
When I tell you I quote this line way too often, I'm serious, it's a problem. Imogen right now is the straight white girl who's trying to be an ally, but her actions are heavily flawed at times, and I would like to see her learn and grow. I like her, and I'd like to see her story continue in the next season. A lot of people find her annoying because of how she goes about her potential relationship with Nick, and I have to disagree. It's not like Imogen is purposefully trying to throw a wrench into Nick and Charlie's relationship. She doesn't know there's anything between them. She's just a girl who likes Nick and is constantly being told by the people around her that Nick likes her back. Of course she's going to try to pursue this relationship. Imogen's biggest crime is being a girl who has a crush on a guy and had hopes of dating him. That's it. Yeah, she did say that she and Nick were basically dating, but I don't think she had any malicious intent with that. I think she's just a teenage girl who was excited at the prospect of finally dating the boy she'd liked for a while. That's quite literally all it is. As soon as Nick tells her he isn't into her, she accepts that, and when she sees Nick go off with Charlie at the end of the season, she's so freaking happy for them. Imogen is not a villain, not by a long shot. Alright, the last thing I really want to talk about in regards to Heartstopper is its open and unapologetic celebration of queerness. Heartstopper is pure joy. That's really the best way for me to explain it. There's so much love and joy in this show, and it's so excited to show it all off. One of my favorite parts of Heartstopper is the friend group made up of Charlie, Nick, Tao, Elle, Tara, and Darcy. This friend group is made up of 90% queer kids, and it's so lovely and realistic. Like calls to like. We are much more likely to gravitate towards other people who are like us, who we can relate to and see ourselves in, because those are the people that make us feel the safest and most comfortable. This friend group is all love and support, and I love it. I love them. What's interesting about Heartstopper as well is that though it's a very positive piece of representation for queer people, it has also left some older queer people feeling this sense of sadness that they never had Nick and Charlie's high school experience, and never will. This has been a phenomenon on TikTok especially. People have made videos gushing about Heartstopper and loving it, but have also made videos expressing that sadness of having missed out on moments as beautiful as the ones shown in Heartstopper. And this is just another reason that I, and so many other people, are so grateful that a show like Heartstopper exists. Heartstopper the show is not this huge story that's inventive and groundbreaking, and frankly neither are the graphic novels, but they're not supposed to be. Heartstopper knows very well what it is, which is a small, simple story full to the brim with heartwarming relationships that has accurate and relatable characters with accurate and relatable issues. That's so cute, it'll make you want to scream. This show knows its target audience. It's very much geared towards teenagers, specifically queer or questioning teenagers. It's something teenagers can watch and relate to and feel seen by. It's a comfort story. It's a reassurance to young people now that they're perfectly valid and worthy of happiness. It's making sure that in 5 or 10 years, when those teenagers are adults, they don't have to feel sad that they didn't have the heartwarming experiences Nick and Charlie and Tao and Elle and Tara and Darcy had. It's something with which people can feel safe. In fact, I think that's the best way to describe it. Heartstopper is a safe space for queer and questioning people everywhere. I can tell you for a fact that there are people out there who need these characters and this show, and there will continue to be people who need it. I'm so glad it exists, both as a graphic novel and a television series. Heartstopper is a form of reassurance to us. It lets people know that there is happiness to be found, no matter who you are or what your sexuality is. It's a promise that things will be okay, even if it doesn't seem like it at the moment. It's a promise of queer joy.